Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a new video. So this topic has been discussed several times. It's kind of beaten with a dead horse kind of topic. I've actually gone over this before, but I have a different experience. So this one's a little bit different since anytime I did a video on this, it was with the previous generation, which is the V8 chassis, but I had the opportunity to sit in, drive, get a feel for the new VB chassis, the WRX. And I got some interesting opinions on it. So one of the questions people always ask me is, should I get an STI or should I get the new WRX? I'm not sure which route to go. So I figured I would go over my thoughts, what I felt during the test drive, and just kind of going over everything. And just let you guys know what I think of the new chassis. You know, is it better than this STI? Is it a better car overall? So let's hop in the car and I'm gonna let you guys know what I thought about the new WRX. All right, so as I mentioned, I got a chance to sit and drive a new VB WRX. It was something that I wasn't necessarily planning on doing, but I had some free time and I decided to go over to my local Subaru dealer, get a feel for it because, you know, it's one of those things that I've seen on the road. A lot of people have opinions and thoughts about this new chassis and everything, and I wanted to kind of get my own thoughts on it. It's not something that I was necessarily interested in purchasing. It was one of those moments I was like, I'm tired of hearing, you know, everybody's thoughts and saying it's better or this or that. So I wanted to kind of get my own opinion, go out and really test drive the car and see what I thought. I did mention in another video that it is very, very hard to get a proper opinion on a quick, 10 to 15 minute test drive. Unfortunately, I really wasn't able to push the car or really put it through its paces, but I am very familiar with the Subaru chassis, with WRXs and STIs over the years. So since I spent so much time in Subarus, it was a pretty easy car to drive. It was a pretty easy car to get an opinion of. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage from that day. It was just one of those things. It was very, very sporadic. Like I said, I had some free time and I just headed over there. They had a few on the lot. I was flat out with the salesman. I was like, listen, I just wanted to test drive it. I have an STI. I'm curious to see what this thing is about and what it feels like and all that. They were super cool about it, totally understood. Because I know when I was interested in the 2015 Plus STI when it first came out, any dealer that I went to test drive or just check one out, they were very, very particular about who was test driving it and everything. And I remember they were treating them like Ferraris, like one-off cars and everything, and they wouldn't let anybody just test drive them. So it was kind of, I wasn't a big fan of that. But with the new WRX, thankfully, I kind of walked in, kind of stated my story and what I was thinking, and they were like, yep, sure, let's go for a ride. So the WRX that I test drove was a limited version, limited trim model. So it was kind of fully loaded. It wasn't the GT model because I was not interested in the automatic. I wanted to drive the manual transmission. So it had all the bells and whistles pretty much. It was in World Rally Blue, which is obviously a pretty common color. And it looked nice. It's not something that I'm crazy about overall in terms of the looks. I really just think they went the wrong way overall. The overall styling and everything with the cladding on the side. But overall, I'm not going to lie, it has grown on me over the time that it has been out since it first debuted, especially with a bunch of companies getting their hands on them, painting all the plastics and everything. I will say that they definitely do look much better than I was ever anticipating. And overall, I don't think it's a bad looking car. It looks pretty menacing coming down the road. There is somebody by me that I see all the time driving one. And anytime I see it in the rearview mirror, I'm like, wow, that looks pretty darn good coming down the road. I think it looks pretty darn aggressive. Granted, theirs is not really modified. They just have a couple little things here and there. They still have the plastic cladding and stuff on the side. But overall, it's still a good looking car. There's definitely parts of the car, as I just mentioned, the plastic cladding that need to be addressed. I do think the car looks worlds better when they are painted. Let's talk about the experience and what I felt driving the car and just sitting in it and getting a feel for it overall. So I got in the car, started it up. It sounded like a WRX. It sounded like the FA motor, very, very similar feeling. In fact, when I was test driving this car, or when I actually went to go purchase it, my salesman actually suggested I go out and test drive. It was a 2017 limited WRX in crystal white pearl, fully loaded. It was beautiful. He was like, hey, just go and test drive it, check it out, see what you think. And to be honest, I absolutely loved it. I came very, very close to buying that one instead of this one, the 2017 STI that I have here. So it was something that definitely piqued my interest, especially with the miles per gallon. The gas mileage was much better in that car at the time as well. So when I first started the VB WRX, like I said, it was a very familiar sound. It didn't feel much different overall. Obviously, the interior, there was a lot of changes. They pretty much changed everything. It definitely felt more luxurious overall. The car felt more put together in a way. It felt like they spent more time and attention on the interior. The doors felt a little bit more solid overall. It felt like a good car. It felt like a solid car. When you compare Subarus back, 10, 15 years ago, it is a world of difference. I know my 2013 WRX hatchback, that thing sounded like I was driving a tin can when I was driving in the rain, especially with the roof. There was no sound deadening everywhere. It was, it was quite the experience. But overall, that is part of the experience. That's one of the reasons why I love those cars so much. But it felt like a really solid car overall. I will say I'm not a big fan of the center console with the giant screen. I get what they were trying to do, but it just, for whatever reason, already looks dated to me. And it looks a little too gimmicky. In a way, it almost seems like a kid's toy. All the fonts and all the pictures and everything, all the icons are just really big. And I don't know, it looks a little bit all over the place. I get what they were trying to do to kind of update things and make it kind of look like a Tesla or something a little bit more modern with bigger screens. But it just didn't do it for me. I much prefer the simpler screens that came in the previous generations, especially with right here, my iDoing head unit. I much prefer this unit over the one in the new WRX. But like I said, everything felt very familiar. It felt like a Subaru. It just felt more put together and a little bit more solid. Now, the driving experience, what did I think? Honestly, it felt like a WRX. Simply felt like the older generation WRX. Overall, the car felt a little bit tighter, a little bit more put together, as I mentioned. But it just felt like a WRX. It didn't feel like anything special. It didn't really wow me. It wasn't something that I was driving and I was like, whoa, this is an awesome driving experience. Don't get me wrong, it was a great car, but it just didn't have that Subaru heritage, that motorsport feel that we all know what a WRX and an STI is. To me, it felt more like a sales gimmick to try to get people into their sports cars, to kind of experience the brand without necessarily experiencing, the rawness that the previous generations were all about. It just felt kind of watered down overall. Like I said, it just felt more like a commuter car. It felt like a good daily driver car. I will say that all the companies that are tuning them and putting intakes on them and just a basic tune, some with a downpipe as well, they're putting out some pretty darn impressive numbers. So there is no doubt that the FA 2.4 is going to be a pretty awesome motor overall. It has a lot of potential. But I will say that don't get too excited. I know that there are a lot of great companies out there putting some serious power down on stock internals and everything, but I feel like this happens with every single new motor that any car comes out with. A lot of companies get their hands on them, start putting a bunch of power into them, and all these people are like, wow, this is great. I'm going to go buy that car. They do the exact same thing. They throw a bunch of power at it, and then something bad goes wrong. What I always find funny is that people think they're like, wow, this is the greatest motor ever. It's holding so much power. Everybody always runs to the dealerships to buy these cars, not just Subarus, just any car with a new motor in general, sports cars. They start throwing all this power on it and they're like, I'm going to go buy this car because it can do this amount of horsepower with just a tune and a downpipe or whatever. And I always laugh at that simply because there's just not enough miles. There's not enough testing to really prove that those tunes and those modifications that you're doing to these cars are reliable. People think they can just get these cars, not just Subarus as I mentioned, and throw crazy amount of horsepower on stock internals and it's going to hold up over time. It's just simply not the case, and I always find it funny after all the years kind of go by with people doing this. Then the issues start creeping up and people are like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this, and they start finding the Achilles heel in all these motors and these cars. And then people are like, oh, it's the worst motor in the world. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I get it. That's the part of the research and design and kind of the whole entire testing of it. That's what people need to do. But I just want to make sure people are getting a good understanding as to, you can't just go out and get a VB WRX and throw 500 horsepower on it and expect it to be, a car that you're going to have for 20 years and it's going to last 300,000 miles. It's just simply not the case. But I am impressed with the numbers that it is putting out. Obviously, it is an updated, fuel injection motor that has a lot of modern technology in it. That motor, the FA 2.4, is something that they have been running in the Ascent for many years. So they do have some testing on it, obviously, in real world. But now that the car enthusiasts are getting their hands on it, it should be interesting over the years to see what happens to it and kind of see where it goes. But I'm definitely optimistic in seeing what it can do. It's pretty interesting to see what these companies are putting out on those motors. It is definitely impressive. But I will say it still has that similar, WRX 4-cylinder sound. It's nothing new. It's not going to sound anything drastically different than the previous version WRX. But sound in general is very subjective, so I'm not going to really get into that. But the overall driving experience for me was nice. I enjoyed it, but it just didn't do it for me. It wasn't anything that I personally wanted to pursue or trade the STI for. Obviously the STI is a more raw driving experience, and that is the main reason why I picked it over the WRX back in 2017. And if there was an STI option today, I still would choose the STI most likely over the WRX. Granted, I have no idea what it would feel like or what it would be like. I still feel like I would choose the more raw driving experience over a more comfortable commuter type of car. So now the question that I'm going to answer is, should you get a WRX or should you get an STI? Now, that is going to be a very hard question to answer simply because everybody's car needs and what they use a car for is different. If you commute 100 miles a day, you're worried about gas mileage, you want something more quiet, more comfortable, a little bit softer overall, the WRX for sure is going to be a safer bet. It is a more comfortable car. It's not as stiff. It's not as raw as an STI. And it's obviously newer, as we just discussed. It's a newer motor. It's a newer car in general. So overall, it's going to be a much more comfortable experience. So if that is something that you're after, I would definitely choose a WRX over the STI. But if you're like me and you want something that is just purely a great driving experience, I still would personally go for a previous generation, the old generation STI. I still think it is one of the best bang for your buck cars that you can possibly get, that, can pretty much handle anything that you throw at it. Whether you're driving in really bad snow or rain, or you're doing autocrossing or tracking or drag racing, or you're doing rally, whatever it may be, these cars are exceptionally capable. You can fit 5 people in this car very comfortably. The trunk space is pretty massive. You can fit pretty much anything that you possibly need. One of my topics I went over years ago was, is this a good dad car? This is a fantastic dad car. You got plenty of space in the back and the trunk. You can fit 2 kids, no problem, in the back with car seats and everything. So it's an extremely capable car. For the price point, I honestly don't think you can beat it, whether you go with a WRX or an STI. As you can see, I'm a little bit biased towards the STI. I personally just think it's an overall better driving experience. Now, don't get me wrong. If you do own a VB WRX, I'm not hating on it. I'm not saying it's a bad car. It's a magnificent car. It's very, very nice. It drives beautiful. A lot of amenities. It's honestly probably one of the better cars out there. If you want something that's comfortable yet still fun to drive, you can still get it in a manual transmission. So it does have a lot of positive things about it. But for me personally, I still would go with the older generation STI, even though it's going to make less power, even though it's older, even though it's got the old dinosaur EJ in it. I still would prefer it over the new WRX. Obviously, I just prefer the looks of this in general over the new WRX. But for me, it's just a better driving experience. It's more raw. It's more driver focused, driver engaging and everything. So to answer your question, should you get an STI, an older generation STI or WRX? It's just going to boil down to what you need the car for. Again, I would still choose the STI. I think it's just a better car overall, despite the new WRX being able to put down some serious power with some little mods. I still think the overall driving experience is better in this car. So it's going to come down to you on what you think is best. I encourage you to go out and drive both, see what you think. One of them is going to speak to you more so than the other. I did the same thing. Like I said, I test drove the limited WRX back to back with this, and this just put a huge smile on my face, even though the WRX was a great car. This thing overall just made me smile bigger and made me realize that this is the car for me. And as you guys can see, I chose the STI over the WRX simply because of the driving experience, and it just made me feel that much better. So I kind of hope this helps you out. I know it wasn't really a straightforward answer, and I know there's going to be a lot of VB WRX owners saying, hey, it's a better car, and you're probably right. Overall, it is a fantastic car, but for me, and for anybody that does ask me which one I would go with or which one they should go with, I would personally still choose the VA STI. I just think it's a better car overall. So that is going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped you out. I know a lot of people are buying cars these days and kind of on the hunt for an STI or WRX. And I know this topic is pretty darn popular because I get asked it pretty much on the daily. So I figured I would go over it, let you know my thoughts after kind of experiencing one, going through the motions and actually driving one for once and seeing what it was all about. Granted, I obviously didn't drive a modified one, so my mind may change if I ever got the opportunity to drive one that has been tuned and kind of modified, to my liking at least. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll be able to do that. But that's going to be it for this one. If you guys have any questions at all, be sure to ask them below. But in the meantime, keep it clean, keep it simple, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.